There we go. All right. Hey, everybody. Welcome to today's webinar, Data Products, What They Really Are and How to Build Them Right. I'm your host, Ryan Dolley, and we're going to be walking you through the topic. We know it's a really hot topic in the industry, very debated. Many people have many opinions about what exactly a data product is, and we're thrilled to talk you through it and help you understand how to understand and apply data products and data product thinking to your data and analytics practice. So we're joined today by an expert on the topic and good friend of mine, Santona Tuli. She's a head of data and really a very clear thinker on the topic of data products. I'm thrilled to be joined by her today, and we'll do an intro and everything in a second. But before we get into that, a few points of order to share. So first, everybody has been muted upon entry, and we have a Q&A capability in Zoom. So if you look down at the bottom, you'll see a Q&A box. Now, we try to do things a little differently here at Good Data. So get your questions in as Santona and I are going through the topic, and we will discuss them in real time as you ask them and we see them in the Q&A box rather than holding them to the end. It's just more fun for us and it's more fun for you if we try to turn this into a conversation between us and the audience. And so get those questions in. And then finally, there will be a follow-up email and a recording will be available to attendees or people who registered but weren't able to attend. So do be on the lookout for that. So what are we actually talking about? Well, what are data products? How does product thinking change data teams and give you some insight into first steps that you can take to move into product thinking? Of course, we are who are we at Good Data? Well, we're a very modern BI platform that's really focused on what you need to build, kind of move in this direction of building data and analytics products. And so, simplicity, flexibility, productivity, scalability, that's all very important. I think fundamentally what it boils down to is that we give you the tools to kind of engage in the product thinking process and then support it with more of kind of an engineering approach to delivering analytics. And we'll talk with Santona a little bit about that. What does that mean and how does an engineering approach help support data product thinking and data product delivery over the course of the presentation. So with that said, I'm going to ask Santona to introduce herself in a second. There we are. All right. So let me just stop sharing my screen here. And there we go. Santona, welcome to the show today. How are you?
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I'm doing great. Thank you.
Awesome. So hopefully people in the audience already know who you are from the excellent work you do. But for anyone who doesn't, could you go ahead and introduce yourself and give us a little info about your background?
Absolutely. So I'm a physicist turned data scientist. So I got started working with data through particle collision physics. And I've worked as an ML engineer, I've worked as a data scientist, I've worked briefly as a product manager. And then most recently, I've been head of data and I'm starting a new position in a couple of days. So we kind of left off company there. But so that's sort of where I'm at. I like to be at the intersection of data and product. I've always really enjoyed product thinking. I've always really enjoyed working with good product managers and delivering good data products. So yeah, I'm really happy to be talking on this topic.
Yeah, that's great. So as promised, we have a question in the Q&A. It's from Ramona Truda says, I came to say hi to Ryan and Santona. So, hey, Ramona, welcome to the show. So let's start with just the question. It seems like it should be simple, but I think it isn't. And that is, what is a data product? And so maybe you could tell us from your perspective, what is a data product? And also I'm curious, how did you first encounter this idea?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I do think it is simple. I think with a lot of topics and ideas in the data space, because it doesn't come in a textbook with a definition. There can be different interpretations and sort of like different sort of definitions along the way. But the way that I see it, and of course it's, happy to field counter ideas, is that data products are any outputs from data, from the data, maybe from the data team or whatever the data infrastructure exists, any output productized. So any data outputs that have been productized is a data product. I like to define it sort of broadly like that, because it's not about deliverables. So we're not talking necessarily dashboards or reports or anything like that yet. That is a part of it, that can be a part of it, but we're not limited to that. And then by productized, I mean, there's also a few sort of similar words in that area as well: production, productization, and all of these things. So what I mean by productized is, sure, productionization can and should be a part of it. And we can talk a little bit about how much sort of software engineering ideas and jargon should or do make it into data practices. But productized is more than that. When you think of something as a product, you're not just thinking about sort of the engineering aspects of how do I productionize this, how do I operationalize this. You're also thinking about, who is this product for? Who are my users? What are their user stories? How are they going to use this product that I'm providing them? And also sort of like, what is the timeline for this output that I need to have? And what do I prioritize versus what do I deprioritize? What does my roadmap look like? And what are we delivering in V1? And what are we pushing back for, some time later? So Ryan, you're a product person as well. So, I see you nodding.
Yeah.
And I think it's all of those things, when we take them together and really treat the outputs as products, then that's when we can deliver successful data products. And the other thing I'll clarify here is, I say outputs because the product is the thing that my users will use, whether that's internal business stakeholders or external users. Sometimes there are, so this new position that I'm starting, I'm going to be helping with the data infrastructure, and that same infrastructure powers both internal analytics and sort of executive business intelligence, but also some embedded end user facing sort of metrics. So it doesn't I mean, you have to be mindful of who your end users are, but that is sort of beside the point that I'm making right now, which is that the output is not just the thing that you're delivering, but or the output can be the thing that you're delivering, but the productization has to go all the way back to like what encompasses that output. So that we have to start thinking about, the whole data pipeline, the ETL process, the infrastructure that sits, and all of that, even though no one's touching that directly, is part of our data products.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with like almost everything you said. So I guess the webinar is over, folks. Thank you for joining us. No, yeah, I mean, it's really, and I think of it. So one thing let's start with this idea, because one criticism of kind of the way you've defined it, and it's also the way I think of it too. So we're on the same page, but just to devil's advocate ourselves here, one criticism I sometimes hear is that, well, you haven't really described a thing, right? Like maybe you're talking about a process, but a lot of people in IT and in data, because data kind of comes out of IT in many ways and not out of software. We have this habit in IT of thinking about, like, we just need these really rigid definitions. Oh, it's got to be a thing, right? Like if I can't define it as like an object type, then I can't understand it, right? Or I don't know how to work with it if it's not like, a database is a thing, a table in the database is a thing. So what is the thing to a data product? And I just kind of like to get your take on that response.
Yeah. In my definition, it can be anything. So I think it is important to um, like I think that is less important than the system that we build in support of those data products. So it's a definition that we might call it data products, but it's really about what goes into building those data products, less so than the thing itself. With that said, I mean, of course, I can give examples of different data products, right? Like, I mean, I already gave some examples. Like, if we're providing a summary dashboard to the CEO or the executive leadership team that they're going to come back to every week, and they're going to look at how the business is performing, that's a deliverable, right? And that we have to productize. If we're again embedding metrics into, so when you use an app and you see like your summary, like just to give a light example, like your bank account, when you go on your bank app, right? Like you have your balance, your recent transaction, all of those things. That's a data product. That's a data product that's touching the end user directly. So that's what I mean when I say external end user facing data product. Because and the reason the distinction exists is because the expectations and SLAs are different between internal products and external products, right? And that's true across the board. Like if you work in infrastructure or tooling and software as well, you might focus on internal dev productivity, and you're building those sorts of tools, and those products are sort of on a different SLA. But the idea of an SLA, the idea of requirements, the idea of like really understanding who the user is and what the specifications, the specs that we have to build to, that's the core part of productizing data or data products. So for me, and yeah, it's less about what the thing actually is, but more about, yeah, I mean, it is partly process, right? Like when you work as a PM or just as a product person, right? Um, it's really about, well, I mean, there's two things. Okay, so I'll say this. There's two things. There's a strategy, and then there's a process, right? So, and you have to hold both of those things together. So on one level, you're thinking about what needs to be built, and you're thinking ahead. You're planning for and really good getting into the why. Why is my user asking for this? What did that? And especially for internal data products, oftentimes the bulk of the work is really understanding what the user even wants, because we're not coming in with a let's say like an idea of, okay, we want to build this for these kinds of users because we see this market need or something like that. It's more about I've been tasked with, or the team's been tasked with, understanding the business, and that's like ill-defined, and then you have to go out and talk to different parts of the business, and through those conversations you sort of understand what the products need to be, what the metrics need to be, and all of those things. And then when you go a step deeper, like, okay, where do I source that data? How do I write those pipelines? What does the cadence need to be, etc. So but once you have that sort of the strategic requirements gathering, right, then it's a little bit more about process, in that I want to see that in a PRD, because that information is crucial. A lot of work has gone into it. A lot of people have gotten in the room to have those conversations and come up with those parameters, and that should be written down. And we're going to refer back to that and throughout the process as we're building our data product. Then I want to see engineering spec doc, right, and ERD. Is something like, and I mean, it doesn't always have to be, like super built out or anything like that, but it's really about this, like having the ethos of product in your process, so that you have this discipline that's really really good. The product discipline is really good at delivering products, and they've like honed in on these like practices and processes, and it's about incorporating those and making sure that the thing that we deliver is up to the bar, and it's maintainable, and we're not like doing a bunch of separate work in a lot of different places. I want to let you jump
Yeah.
in, Ryan. Like one thing that I want to that I think about when I think of data products too is, like, think of a data team that's just like drowning in requests, right? Like ad hoc requests coming from different parts of the organization. And maybe there's even a nice intake process set up. It's still ending up as a bunch of tickets somewhere, right? And a bunch of Jira tickets or something. And the relationships between, like, what are the connections between the different asks? And slowly and surely we'll have sort of LLMs sort of do some of that, like figure out what the broader pieces are that have to be done. But that is very much a product task, right? You sit there and you see what the asks are and you create a story out of that. You synthesize the story and you synthesize the pieces that need to be worked on. So yeah, all of that together, and then all of a sudden it's easier, right? Everything, you're not drowning anymore because you have a plan and a strategy for how you're gonna serve your users.
And I think to me, you've hit on really the key differentiator between kind of a product approach to data and a more traditional, you might say project or IT driven approach to data. And that is that the looking at the intake and figuring out, like, what is the story here, right? What is the story of these tickets that we have overall, and how does that story, what is that telling me about how I need to prioritize different things on my my camera's going crazy here. Let's see if we can fix that. How does that, what does that story tell me about prioritization and how we deliver these things? And also, I think, and there's a couple questions, so we'll get to the questions in a second, but I'll just make this one last point. I mean, I think that there's one of the big differences is in you need to think about, when you're doing products, like, I encourage people to think about the stuff they make as a data team, whether you're building it internally for an internal audience, or maybe you're making data products for your customers or consumers or vendors outside of your company. Either way, I always like to say, like, imagine that you're selling a real physical product, and that product has to sit on a shelf in a store. You want to make sure that you have the right mix of products on that shelf so that consumers can find what they need quickly and it's appealing to them and they choose to walk it up to the register and buy it, right? That way of thinking is very different from what data teams have traditionally done, which is, I've got this list of tasks, we're going to knock out the tasks, and we're going to judge ourselves based on how many tasks we were able to complete in any given unit of time, right? That's very different than, like, maintaining this, an end cap at a grocery store of whatever it is, salad dressings. And, like, you have to have the right salad dressings that are appealing to your audience, that they find valuable, right? And if you think of the data outputs of your team in the same way, you will do some things differently. For example, you will say, hey, this product actually isn't meeting its need anymore. It's no longer as valuable and it's not worth maintaining. And so we're going to sunset it. This is like one of the things that data teams are always, I find, are really bad at, is like they tend to want to maintain everything they've ever built. And they don't look at it and say, this piece of it, like, it's not worth maintaining anymore. We've got something new and better that's more appealing. We're going to get rid of this old product. Just as a simple example to analogize it, and there's kind of a question here from Isabella, which is, could you please give an example of non-data products? And I would say it's like, well, salad dressing is a non-data product, right? But it's almost like taking, the way people think about, this comes out of software, I would say, and the way that you think about, the software products you build. But I think you can analogize it to products in the real world really easily, and just say, like, how do people think about the products that their company offers, and then take that type of thinking. We need to have the right products, the right mix at the right time to make it easy and make them easy to understand and find. Take that and apply it to data, and those become your data products. And they could be dashboards and reports, yes, or they could be, depending on who your audience is, you're also going to have tables in a database, or data contracts for application developers. Like, all of those things could be your product, and maybe all of them will be.
Yeah, your data catalog.
Right. Exactly. There's a question here, and Constantine asks, like, could you give an example of an internal data product? And I'll kind of tell you where this comes from. I think, our customer base and a lot of the people watching, if they're good data customers, a lot of our biggest strength is in that external analytics product realm where you're building something for someone outside of your company, right? And so I think a lot of our users and customers are very familiar with thinking about products in that respect, and maybe less so like, oh, how would I take this thinking and apply it to an internal facing use case too? So could you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely. And actually, I mean, I'm realizing now maybe it's worth taking a step back as well and do a one minute segue. So, yeah, as Ryan said, a product is a thing that someone makes and delivers to someone else, right? And you pay some money to get it. It's a commodity of any sort. And then so when we talk about software commodities, you buy a thing like you buy Jira, you buy Asana, you buy whatever Spotify or something like that. That's the product that this team is building, right? And then there's this product practice, which is how do you do product well? How do you deliver good products, right? And there's a whole discipline around exactly answering that question. So like some of the things we mentioned earlier, right? Creating a product requirements doc, creating an engineering requirements doc from there, sort of tracking your tickets is sort of more project, but it is part of it as well. So strategizing on what to build and when to build it, when, so planning ahead, that's a roadmap, right? You say, okay, in Q1, I'm gonna send these updates to the Spotify product, and then these 5 I have to push until Q2 because of these other constraints and stuff. So the product person or product people at a company are sitting there, they have all of these tensions, basically constraints, and constantly shifting ones, right? Like your funding can be a constraint, your people power is a constraint, all of these things, and you have to do what we call t-shirt sizing at the beginning of every quarter or some other time frame like that, where you figure out like these are the things we're supposed to build or we need to build, and this is what we can do, this is how much time we have. And sort of when you go really, really far along that access towards the engineering side, then you start thinking about things like, what is my sprint like? What cadence am I developing on? How do I deliver and stuff? But that's sort of more tactical, and product is a little bit more strategical. So with that said, so anything can be a product as long as there's someone invested in it and someone's going to look at it and get value from it. And as long as you're tracking what sort of value they are getting and you're maintaining it. And yeah, good products will maintainability, as Ryan mentioned, is a really important piece of it, right? Like you don't just build something and then step away from it. And, like that would be like, yeah, I mean, then if we went that way, then nothing would ever be updated. You'd still be, I don't know, drinking Coke with cocaine or something like that, right?
Yes.
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 Things have to be updated.
Yeah, absolutely.
So then we come to data products, right? So that's, you have these software products. And when I say external data products, it's sort of like the Spotify's, right? And it's a little bit harder to find an example of that, but I mean, the bank account thing that I said was one. Or if you're a gamer, right, and you're like you have you play in what are they called, free world kind of games or something, and you have
Open world,
your
yeah.
open world, yeah. So you have your inventory of things that you have, your money, you have your XP, and all of those things. The fact that you're seeing those live real time and the transactions are happening and everything's getting updated, that's a data product. There has been, I mean, it's part of the overall software product, that is the game, but those numbers specifically, like there's a database, there's actually multiple databases that are tracking all of those things. The transactions are happening, and we're doing the aggregations and we're sending out those numbers. So that's an external facing data product. Now, by contrast, an internal facing data product is where most data / analytics teams focus on at a company. So when the data science boom happened and stuff, right? Some people needed folks for like these external data products. Some people wanted to build things out of data. So that now I'm talking about, so e-commerce, for example, where data is used to personalize This is becoming more 5 minute than 1 minute, but where data is used to personalize what we show you and how you interact with the product. So that's a data that's a product that's fundamentally rooted in user data and how you use it. So that's yet another sector, and also very important one, and where product thinking is extremely important. And then there is the analytics space, where typically we use this word data products recently. I mean, it's a fairly recent term, and here we're talking about just things that the data team output that help you understand the business better. So analytics or business intelligence is the other name for it. And the idea here is I have a 360-degree view of all the data that my company generates, that my users generate, that when there's a support ticket that comes in, that generates the data. When a feature request comes in, when I sign on a new customer, all of that data, I get a 360-degree view. And then, that doesn't come for free. I build the pipelines to get all of that data. That's ETL. And then I model it in my warehouse. That's sort of like more, data modeling, data architecture. And then off of that, I build some things that I deliver out to the rest of the company. Now, it's going to depend on who my user is, what exactly the deliverable is, what exactly the product, and this is why it gets tricky, right? What exactly the outcome is. And that could be, like I said, a dashboard that the CEO looks at for 5 seconds a week, but it's still like something you have to maintain, because he's going to come back or she's going to come back and look at it again next week. So you have to make sure that it's updated correctly. Or it can be like a database in Snowflake, for example, that you give access to customer success data engineers for, and things like that. So especially if you have a centralized data team, then you build out this infrastructure and you build out those specific products, and each of those can be a data product. But my point is, more fundamentally, you have to treat the whole thing, this 360 view, 360 review that you've generated, you have to treat the whole thing as a product, because otherwise you'll end up in this unending cycle of, okay, Joe asked for this, let me build it. Jack asked for that, let me build that, right? And you're not going to be able to have modular pieces that you sort of keep using and leveraging, and that is extremely important. That's how you reduce tech debt. That's how you reduce like ad hoc, being pulled in multiple directions.
Yeah. I mean, in the salad dressing analogy, it's almost like, all the salad dressings have olive oil in them, right? And you might have 8 different flavors of salad dressing, but they all have olive oil as a base. And you can, like, in the data world, it's like, hey, we have these metrics, and there might be 8 products that contain these metrics, but we're able to like build, we maintain the metrics, and you use this product process to govern it. It becomes much more efficient. It does lead to a good question. We have a number of questions in here. So, but this is from Chetna Yogesh, who asks, how would you, so this is very relevant to what you just said, how would you convert requests and sell it as a product? It's very easy to get stuck in the traditional way of ad hoc requests, put out the fires, be very reactive. So, how would you kind of tilt things more towards this product way of thinking if you were in that situation?
Yeah, no, that's a fantastic question. So, I mean, as with everything, it's about buy-in, right? If you want to implement sort of product thinking for data at your company, you're going to need the buy-in from your skip level and the leadership and whatnot. And the biggest ammunition you're going to have there is efficiency, right? So that, like, the single biggest thing that this does, that productizing data outcomes or data infrastructure does, is it increases efficiency. So, I mean, it would take a little bit of time if you really wanted to go down to the numbers, right? But basically you say, I have 4 data engineers plus scientists, and they're doing, this is what they're doing. This is, they're responding to this request. That I've got one person that's just focused on CS, one person that's focused on this, but the underlying data is the same, right? I mean, just to give an example or something like that, like, you have to point to the inefficiencies that exist in the process that are, I think they're not at all hard to see if you're looking for them, but we've gotten so used to data working that way. Like, I send a request, I get the answer. And this is why there are so many like, pulling the leg posts around like, hey, I need this by, by lunchtime. Can you just get me this number? And then the number is like this whole thing that you have to do.
Right.
So you have to be able to point to that. And then you say, like, but what I'm proposing is we productize this. right? And there's some like tactical, tangible steps that you take towards that. And some of that, again, comes from software engineering, and you can point to those as well. Like if I had just versioned this, query, or this, if this person had like versioned it, then, or if they'd at least shared it with the rest of the team, then they wouldn't be the bottleneck. When, XYZ asks for this, they're not going to have to run it again and provide it. Let's just, version that. That's step one, right? And then you go, okay, like since we're versioning it and like we can have more eyes on it now, so let's do a sort of review process for the code to make sure we're good, or let's have multiple people sort of run the same thing. I mean, these are baby steps, right? But that's how you get to, okay, this is, you don't just come in and you ask for something and get it. There's or let me say, you should be able to do that as well to an extent. There's always going to be requests and some things with urgency, but in the ideal scenario, you're gonna preemptively have that metric built in already, or have that part of the model in such an obvious way that it's trivial to do that extra bit of work. And that's the efficiency, right? If you have the correct data model, if you have the correct data catalog, and everyone knows what exists, I mean, really, it's variations of the same questions usually over and over again. And like I like to say this a little bit tongue in cheek, but like there's roughly 60 odd questions that you want to answer about your business, and everything else is like a variation of that. Like you're always going to be interested in like customer churn, you're always going to be interested in monthly active users, like things like that, right? And your data model should incorporate all of that, and if you correctly productize it, then any request off top of that is going to be very easy. So yeah, show them, I guess, to get buy-in, like show them this podcast, right? Or like, like it's a work in progress, but like there are examples, like firsthand examples of teams that have done this productization of data, and their efficiency has gone up significantly compared to how it was operating before.
Absolutely. So a couple other questions here. This one's more of a comment. Richa Chaturvedi says, I agree with Ryan, adding the word value in the definition of a data product is key. Definitely. You really need to understand that. I think that's honestly the core of product thinking to me, is like understanding the user or the end consumer of whatever you're building and what is valuable to them, oftentimes in their terms as they understand it. And that will guide you to build the right thing, right? And then everything flows from that. If you can't get that part right, then your CI/CD pipelines and your metrics layer, all of that is going to be for nothing.
Absolutely. And yeah, I mean, this is the point that I haven't gotten to get to yet, but tracking your and okay, so when we say metrics, right, data metrics, there's like metrics about the business, but you should also have metrics on your data products themselves, and you need to decide that in conjunction with your users what that should look like. You don't just arbitrarily say, okay, if 5 people from this team looks at this dashboard or something every week, then good, they're finding it useful. It's not like that. You have to talk to that team, you have to see what they're looking for, what is going to be the thing, like the unit of value is sort of how I like to think of it. What is the unit of value for them? And then you find the metric that like approximates it. All metrics are, proxies, but the metric that proxies that, and that becomes part of your, sort of your productization, that becomes part of your tracking. And so when you maintain a bunch of different products, like part of your role on the data team, or someone's role on the data team, maybe the most product inclined person, has to be not just building the things that folks are asking for, but looking at this like looking at the set of metrics around how your data products are doing and what needs to change. And this is where the sunsetting thing comes in that you had mentioned, Ryan, right? Like, and looking at this like monitoring page, let's call it, you should know which products are successful, which are not, which are getting old. And so when you have new requests come in, you should be able to put those up against your existing data products and say, okay, the reason this is coming in, even though it's kind of like it has an overlap with this other product that I have, is because for some reason, people are not going to that older product anymore. So there's something missing here. So then you dig deep on that and you find the new pieces that you have to build so that you're not reinventing the wheel. You're not building a whole data product again. You're just like making your products better. And then ideally you have like a finite number of data products that you're continuously improving, continuously, like building further and whatnot. And that becomes easier.
Yeah, and it's so easy. I could think back to the beginning of my career, especially, which is, getting to be a long time ago now. But like the data team I was on, we were constantly getting these requests where we actually already had what they were asking for, right? And I think if this product thinking had been in place back then, the way we responded to that would have been very different. I think the way we responded to it at the time, and I think this is still true, especially at the enterprise level on many data teams, is with frustration. Like, we already did this work. So, like, why are these people coming to us? They just keep asking us for stuff we've already done, right? Product thinking would have helped us to do two things. Look at the discoverability of what we've built. I think there was a big problem there, so people couldn't find what they needed. But then the second half of it is oftentimes even like their understanding of what we needed, we were just translating into what we had, and saying like, hey, they say they need this, but we've already got it, right? So what's the disconnect? Well, the disconnect is the thing that we had built was not meeting that value that they were looking for. And we couldn't see that at the time, looking back on it, I mean, obviously, looking back on your early career, there's lots of things you would do differently. That's part of growing as a person. But this is one of them. Like, I wish we had these ideas back then, because I think that it would have done us a lot of good, right? And that's kind of what you're talking about, right? Like maintaining the product portfolio, and how can it help you? Well, you get this request, and now you have the tools with using product thinking and the data product approach to dig into it, and you're in that scenario where like, hey, they're asking for something we already have. Well, that's a clue that maybe you have a problem in discoverability, or maybe the thing you think you have, you don't really have it, or they don't really need it. At least not in the way that you're presenting it. So we've got.
Right. And I mean, just real quick for the product folks that are listening, right? Think about, and I mean, as a VP of product yourself, think about how much time and effort you spend on figuring out if your product is successful, right?
Right.
And in some sense, maybe like one could argue that it's easier because there's like revenue is the ultimate thing that is telling you whether you found that product market fit or not, and whether it's. But I mean, that's not really true, because even if you have a really successful product in the market, chances are you have inefficiencies that you can remove, and then it's like bottom line, it's a much better revenue generating product and whatnot. But I mean, think about how much time you spend thinking about that, like wondering or like trying to answer the question of how well is this product doing, what needs to be changed, and just bring that down to the data team. That's it. Like figure out the right metrics, go from there. And actually, sorry, I know you want to jump to the questions. One other thing, product marketing, right? The person who asked about how do I get buy-in for this, or that's how I interpreted the question anyway.
Yep.
Another big part of product is product marketing, is figuring out the right way to talk about what you're building to the right audience, figuring out who the right audience are, so that your product has visibility, discoverability. And that's a very important part of, so if you're like, the tech lead on the data team, or just, senior data scientist, right? Part of your work should be marketing to your users, and let's say internal users in this case. Right, this is what we're doing, this is what we're building, and this is why we're making these decisions, and this is like this, look at this cool thing that we're building. Like, so often teams will build especially internal teams and data teams will build tools or some sort of product that just no one uses, or very few, it's underutilized. And that's because like partly because no one knows about it or no one understands what it is. I mean, like, oh, yeah, I heard that you guys built this. I don't really know what it does. But without that usage, like there's no point, right? Like you can spend how many ever hours you want building it, but what's the point?
Yeah, I mean, I can think of specifically, when we talk about my early career, and the technology stack here will date me, but I can think of very early in my career, I spent about 6 months working on a series of like interlocking OLAP cubes for the product management office at the company I was working at, where you could be looking at kind of one domain, and then that had its own OLAP cube, and then you could drill into another domain between cubes. It was all very elegant, very technically, right? And then after I delivered it, I found out, maybe 3 months later, it was like, oh yeah, like two of the 45 project managers actually used it. You know, the other the other 43 were like, oh, that's very interesting. Anyway, I'm going to go back to tracking in Excel, right? And this is like, for me, the passion for product thinking literally comes out of how I felt that day. And like, what could I have done to avoid that feeling? And I think if I had had the tools of product thinking and the data product lifecycle, I would not have spent 6 months or whatever it was working on it, right? I would have delivered something in about 3 weeks. And I would have gotten some feedback at that point that would have, pointed me in a very different direction than this sprawling, elegant set of technical, the technical mastery on these OLAP cubes was very high, and its actual usefulness was negligible, is where I wound up. Okay, so questions. And thank you all for joining us today, and the great questions. There's a lot of them in here, so let's try to get through some of them. All right, so we have this question from Amit. He asks, please share some of the best practices to address compliance challenges in data products. And I would add on to that, like, do data products introduce any novel compliance challenges versus other approaches?
I don't think so. I mean, either way, you have the set of questions that the business wants answered. And I mean, there are various models, none of which exclude data products. But like when we talk about data mesh, for example, or like centralized versus decentralized data teams, we're talking about frameworks on how to answer those questions, right? What the best data architecture and like human architecture is on top of that, to be able to answer our business questions. So unless you're introducing entirely new, like, I mean, I can't imagine a scenario where you'd suddenly like introduce like new data or something that's like you're not supposed to have, or your users are not supposed to have, or like that. The compliance part of it is sort of the way that I think about it. What your users want is what you have to deliver, and if that is some of that data there, it has to be treated specially, then you have to treat that with white gloves, no matter what framework you have in mind for delivering, or in place for delivering those data products. So as far as like GDPR goes, as far as like scrubbing PII information goes, or HIPAA in the case of healthcare and stuff, you're going to have to pay attention to those things regardless. Yeah, the only thing that product thinking would bring you here is a positive, which is you would be forced to acknowledge all of those, write all of them down, and think through them ahead of time, so that you're not building for a few weeks or whatever, and then you realize, oh dang, I have to like do this compliance thing with this data. You sit down ahead of time, you see what data you need, what their constraints need to be, and what the assumptions are and stuff. So you just have a better, you start off at a better place for addressing your questions.
And I think that transitions really nicely into Elliot's question, which is, how do you see data teams evolving in terms of structure? So centralized, decentralized, like domain-oriented data mesh architectures, federated architectures, to best support the development and scalability of data products. How do you see that evolving?
Yeah, this is not a one size fits all question. Like you cannot answer this question without taking into consideration like what the size of the company is, what the size of the data needs are, what kinds of. So I will answer this mostly thinking about like mid-size startups, I'd say, or mid-size companies that sort of like fairly recently, let's say, recognize the need for a data team and a business intelligence function. So when you come in at that stage, which is like, I don't know if it sounds odd or not, but that is the vast majority of cases. Because when folks are building a software to sell or a product to sell, that's what they're focused on. They're not focused on understanding the business or how well they're performing. So it's sometime later that like, oh, we need to do this. We need a data team, or we need a data function. So when you come in at that stage, right? So let me actually look at the phrasing of Elliot's question for a second.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. How do you see the data teams evolving in terms of so when you come in at that point, usually in my experience, what happens is you think about a centralized data team, and part of the reason you do that is because some data needs existed, or some data needs were recognized earlier, but the data talent were hired into the domain teams to sort of be scrappy and solve those problems in a more scrappy way. So like the default is you start with a little bit more like decentralized structure or domain driven structure, and then you think, okay, I need something to consolidate this. So that's when sort of the centralized team or data team comes in. And honestly, to me, it does not matter what exact framework you end up using. Like, I'm not here to talk about the value proposition of different frameworks for organizational or data organization. To me, what matters is having sort of having the foresight, right? And then that's having that product sense and product strategy to know which things need to be productized and know which things are going to be like reusable, and like what processes would have to be repeatable, and taking out those inefficiencies. So as like do you see data teams evolving blah 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 as what, as scalability? So your team has more data. Let's say like your company gets more data, for example, it grows from 10,000 users to 10 million users or something. Really the only thing that's changing is the volume and perhaps the frequency of data. So those are more infrastructure questions, right? Maybe you need to swipe out your small cluster with a larger cluster, right? Maybe you need to migrate to something else that's a little bit cheaper. Things like that. Like, nothing should change fundamentally about how you are designing and delivering your data products. And when you upgrade tools or things like that, like if you correctly productize it, of course it's going to take some effort. No migration is ever free, and there are businesses that are built on top of migrations.
Yeah.
But as long as you do it sort of piecewise, it should not break your whole setup. It should not break your data products. I don't know, Ryan, do you agree with that?
Yeah, I do. I mean, I think, I'm very interested in how this evolves. I mean, I think that, if you look at like the federated, centralized, decentralized data team, it's, of course, the answer has to be, it depends on where you actually are. I do think I'm very interested in kind of the data mesh concept as it evolves. I think I don't see a lot of people doing true data mesh right now, but I see a couple ideas coming out of it, like the domain oriented architectures and data products in particular are the two that I really see people trying to embrace. I think that's a like, for a large organization, I think decentralization is a very interesting approach, but I have also been around long enough to know that like this is a pendulum. That it's like, oh, you know what? We're going to decentralize the data team. We're going to move all the analysts into the business, and and then that process takes 4 or 5 years to fully work its way out, and then it's like, and then it's a grass is always greener situation. Then you start to see, oh, the advantage. What if we centralize? Like, look at all these advantages we could have if we had all these smart data people under one roof, and then you bring them back, and then you push them. It's kind of a never-ending cycle. But it all like it really depends on where you are, where your company is. Do you have the ability to do decentralization? Can you ever really do it? You know, like well, okay, who's going to run Snowflake, right? Someone has to. Even if you're going to say, well, we're going to have all these data analysts and engineers in the departments, like, well, they're all going to be using the same Snowflake, or not, but they should, they should be at least have the same account. And then someone in team A is going to want data from team B. Whose responsibility is that, right? Um, uh, Ramona says the pendulum swings and kind of finds its way around to Excel. That's Excel is actually, I think, the pendulum itself. It's just Excel's taped to it, swinging back and forth.
Nice visual.
So a couple more comments here, and then we'll wrap things up. I want to thank everybody for being such an active and involved audience. So Maria has a question, and it goes back. It's kind of a throwback to 35 minutes ago now, but I did want to make sure we address it. You were talking about what could be a data product, and I think you mentioned like a data catalog as something that could be a data product. And Maria's question is, she thinks of the data catalog as kind of a tool that allows you to document the tables or maybe the data products, but not a product itself. And so how would you think about that? Like, is the catalog itself a product?
Yeah, so I think we're splitting hairs a bit. There's like pedantic points that you could make and stuff. I mean, I'm not saying Maria is doing that, but
Yeah.
the way that I see it, right? Is someone getting value from your data catalog? Yes, absolutely. Anyone using any of your data products is getting value out of it. Do you care about tracking how often people are actually referring to your data catalog, how they're getting value? Yes, absolutely. Right. Or is it, at some point, if no one's using your data catalog, then at some point it's just going to go back to, yeah, this guy has been around at the company and they know all the, he or she knows all the definitions. And let's just ask them. Right. So it's 100% a product in the sense that you need to invest in it. You need to think about how it's built, how it's delivered, how it's evangelized or shared within the company, and then you have to track how it's used. And so in that very in that sense, I would say absolutely it is a product.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, it's a philosophical question at the end.
Right. If you're applying, like I would say, let's say you're rolling out a data catalog, I would say, well, apply product thinking to your data catalog, right? And then it becomes a product. I mean, think about like Amazon, right? Amazon is in some way analogous to this. Amazon has products, but Amazon is also a portal where you find other people's products. And Amazon is one of the companies where this product thinking idea comes from, and so I think Amazon, that's a good analogy to say the catalog itself can be a product that contains products.
Right. And I would say one other point there, as far as data infrastructure, I think it's also extremely important to think of data infrastructure through a product lens, even if we don't call it a product. And I mean, one of the reasons is there are some users that you will want to give access directly to your warehouse, right? Then clearly your warehouse is a data product, and then some users you might want to welcome to write the ETL pipelines that so it's you can go pretty deep in this rabbit hole, but the important thing is not what we call the product, but more how we bring product thinking into the whole setup.
Yeah. Maria clarified. Sorry, my point is it's a product, but it's not a data product. Sorry for the confusion. No, it was a good question though, I think.
Absolutely.
All right. So a few other points here or things that people are bringing up, and then we'll wrap things up. So Attila, cool name, asks, is it okay to say no, we're not going to deliver that very niche data product? For example, we're working on higher value products and yours is just too low value.
Absolutely. Yeah. And that's what, again, product thinking enables or better equips you to do that. Because you can you have the ammunition to say this is what we're working with, this is our roadmap, and also try to find the things that might help with them answering their niche question, right? That's fine too. Like I think a data team's job is not just to provide the answers, but to like enable and empower as well. So like, why are they interested in this niche thing, and are they able to like dig into it and stuff? But I always say, like, as a product thinking person or a product person, I don't really know what to call myself, but when someone comes in with a request, I want to see the value that they assign to the, what they're going to achieve through that request. So as if they come to me and I'm like I'm on the data team and they say I want this dashboard, or I want to track this metric, I come back with, okay, what is the business value of this? And that's another thing that we can talk about on a later webinar or or podcast.
Yeah.
But yeah, so you should be able to say like this, they should be able to tell you what they see as a business value, and then you use that against them if you have to say, hey, look, I have these other requests that have higher business value. You can't
Yeah.
afford to.
All right. So we're at the top of the hour. There's one last question I want to ask, and this came in from anonymous attendee, but I think it is kind of the one thing we haven't talked about, you haven't heard, of course, that you probably expect to hear in everything you attend nowadays is the word AI. And so the question is, good data products are all about addressing the use cases of the end users. Traditionally, we've had data scientists researching and developing specific analytics to solve individual use cases. With AI becoming a mainstream tool, how do you see the evolution of this process of identifying and addressing a multitude of use cases?
Yeah, the short answer is, as with everything else, I think AI is going to help, but not solve. And I mean, in the interest of time, I might want to leave it at that. I don't know. Would you add like so? Okay, yeah,
Yeah.
I'll let you, yeah.
I mean, I can tell you how I use it, which is like I use it to help. I mean, honestly, its most useful thing for me right now as a product person is actually its ability to understand, summarize, and draw connections in large amounts of text. So, whereas I might, instead of spending many hours reading through the deluge of requests we might get, I will still read many of them because it's important to still read them. But then I will say, okay, help me summarize this, help me understand like what are the major themes of these 180 requests we got in the last week, and then also to clarify my thinking, like here's how I'm thinking about it. Did I miss something? Is there a connection I didn't make? That is what I find it most useful for.
Yeah, it's the ultimate rubber duck, right?
Yeah, ultimately. The last question, Richa says, this was a great discussion. Will there be more similar webinars, maybe double clicking on the framework discussion? And I'm happy to share that, in fact, there are more and similar webinars. So give me a second to size this properly because my monitor is acting crazy. So what do we have coming up? You will want to join us on May 27th. Analytics without engineering is just reporting. Real talk with industry experts. Those two industry experts joining us will be Joe Reese and Matt Housley, authors of Fundamentals of Data Engineering, to talk about analytics engineering, and where things are going. At June 4th through 5th at Big Data and AI World Frankfurt, we'll be presenting on some of these topics. I will be there joined by one of our customers to kind of talk through data products and engineering in the analytics space. And then June 25th, join us for our Q2 product updates, so where we actually talk about the good data product and what's going into it in Q2. Of course, follow us on LinkedIn, Facebook, all those good places. Santona, where can people follow you?
LinkedIn.
All right. Great. So we're going to stop it there. Thanks for riding with me here for the full hour, Santona. I appreciate it. Always great to talk to you. I look forward to the. I assume you'll be announcing your new gig publicly at some point soon. So I look forward to everybody learning about that. And thank you for joining us on the webinar today, everybody. There will be a recording of this sent out early next week. So if you want to replay some of it, feel free to. If you like this type of thing, tell your friends. We do this regularly here at Good Data. And until next time, take care, everybody. Bye, Santona. It's good talking to you.
Bye.